Annielytics. And now, welcome to the Annielytics podcast with your host, Laura Edel.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Annielytics podcast. I am your host, Annielytics, also known as Laura Edel. I am the Chief Data Scientist on the AI Sustainability and Market Development team at Microsoft. Today, I am very excited to have Danica, and forgive me, Danica, I don't know what your last name is. I just see Danica.
Yeah, that's my bad. Danica Westguard.
Danica Westguard. Okay, I was going to go with if your name is just Danica, like, I don't have another name. That would have been epic cool, but that's all right. Danica Westguard is a great name. Welcome to the show, Danica. I'm very excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So we're going to take a very interesting pivot, I think, as we've talked to folks during COVID, and as we were all in quarantine and then working from home. We have not had one guest come on that actually had a requirement to be back in the office. And a little birdie, mentioned to me that this might be something that you are required to do. And in thinking it through as a woman, a lot of things came up. So first, tell me a bit about where you work today and tell me a bit about your experience going back to the office after having worked from home.
Yeah, so I work in the oil and gas sector. So I'm a senior data scientist at an operator. And it's been a pretty good adjustment going back to the office. I don't think coming as a surprise to anybody. I think it was really easy to fall into working from home. I think especially in a data science role, right? Our roles are independent, it's introvert dominated. It's very comfortable for us to be at home on our computers, working away right next to your dog, rubbing their belly and having some emotional support from that.
So yes.
But it's been an adjustment going back, right? Everybody has to go back to commutes. You have to wear pants instead of leggings. You have to do your hair better than it would just look over. You can cast with Zoom,
Yeah. You made the comment about pants versus leggings, and it just made me think of the commercial of the gentleman who's in his underwear and he looks at his wife like, what? It's not a Zoom call? And it's so true. Like, from top up, it's like you have your business, wear, and from bottom down, largely during this pandemic, I've been in yoga pants and Uggs, depending on the season, of course, or yoga pants and flip-flops. And so you're right. You forget about, and I didn't even think about the commute. So all that time spent in the car, that, now if you think about your day and you think about, you're rolling out of bed, you're doing your morning routine and you're right there. So it's just, does that time to get to work, did that affect you the very first time going back where you're like, wow, I forgot how much time I spend either driving to or from work? I
think so. It's been a pretty good adjustment, and I'm blessed with having a relatively short commute, but I think we can all remember the beginning of the pandemic and how much more time and what a better work-life balance we felt that we had right when it started, right? You cut that commute, you were gonna get your workout done in the morning. Maybe it was at home because the gyms were closed, but you were gonna use your commute time to be productive. And now, your work week, in my opinion, feels quite a bit longer having to go in. I'm more tired in the evening, and it's not because I worked harder during my 9 to 5. It was just because it's legitimately a longer day. And then you have to factor in things like going back to the dry cleaner and all those other little things that add up to throw your previous work-life balance that had come into a harmony working from home kind of back out of whack a little bit till you readjust.
And so things like lunch, did they open up facilities, on your campus to, in line with everybody coming back?
So it just went to status quo last week that you can eat lunch with your coworkers.
So before you had to do social distancing and...
Yes, there was no lunch with your coworkers, not even a socially distanced lunch.
Oh.
It was kind of odd almost because you were back in the office, but on Zoom in the office. So you weren't seeing anybody, but you were commuting, and it's definitely laxing back up, right? Vaccination rates are going up. People are more comfortable. You're still masked and socially distanced, but you are going to have an in-person meeting. You're just going to sit 8 feet away from them while you have it.
What state are you in?
Texas.
Okay. And so do you know what phase you're on in terms of the reopening of your state?
I think we're basically fully reopened.
Okay.
Yeah, and our company, I think like we're 80% vaccinated or so. So we're pretty vaccinated.
Wow. Yeah, that's like, that's largely ahead of the curve just on average. So that says a lot that you have, so many employees willing to go get vaccinated, because it's an interesting conundrum. I'm vaccinated. I believe in vaccination. But as a company, can you mandate your folks go get vaccinated? And it then creates this whole political, argument. And at the end of the day, I think states opening is like, it was so foreign to me. Like, wait, I don't have to wear a mask. I don't know. I don't have any lip gloss on. That was honestly my first thought. The very first time I went out, I'm like, just like wearing yoga pants on bottom, I also have stopped wearing lipstick, lip glosses because of the mask. So I have an abundance of them these days. And so the very first time I took it off, I was like, oh my goodness, I had to stop and think what was on this part of my makeup. So I get it. All of the small things that we have taken for granted, and it's funny too, because, in different public forums and anonymous forums, people are complaining largely about the technology companies and, going back to the office. And at the end of the day, I think, we're lucky that there's this hybrid work mentality. Some, some departments and fields can work from home, like in sales, others go into the office by choice. But, to hear people complaining now because they got so used to it, and then being like, it's, it's this big deal. I'm like, you were hired and you were in person. A pandemic came that nobody could have planned for, and now we're just going back to the way it was. Is that, how your company looked at it, basically?
I think so. Yeah. Personally, I think that there's probably a lot of value to hybrid. I'll be honest, being back in person, especially as we've been able to collaborate, it is nice popping into a more junior data scientist office and helping them run through code as opposed to over Zoom. So I don't think there's nothing to collaboration in person. I think there's definitely some value in it, but I think there's also value in letting me sit at home for 8 hours and get through the code I need to get through today, right? There's probably some real value in taking what we can learn from the pandemic and the silver linings that came with it and change the way we work today. Absolutely. Compared to completely traditional. And I think sooner or later, everybody's going to end up somewhere in that spectrum.
In between. Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the best outcomes in my perspective was the fact that industries, not even just companies, but whole industries like banking became virtual, overnight. And, was oil and gas another one of those that, when the pandemic hit, didn't have a lot of remote office workers. It was something that they had to very quickly ramp up to.
Yeah, oil and gas, I think that threw most people for a pretty good loop. You're used to some level, like I used to run rigs, right? So I was used to
that's awesome.
I was used to sitting in Houston and being in charge of, a rig full of men a couple states away. So I was used to some level of not being in person with my coworker, but it went from like you scheduling a Zoom call and not one person being on video, because who would dare, to being, everybody, like, I don't even care to be on Zoom anymore. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'll look horrible. It doesn't matter. Like, you just get so used to it. So there was a huge cultural shift getting people to get on video and learn how to share their screen, right? Because I don't have that much bad to say about oil and gas. It's a necessary function, but we're not necessarily typically the most tech savvy.
I was going to say, maybe not the tech savvy industry we all think about when we think about tech savvy industries.
Exactly. So I think there was definitely a learning curve getting, people to.
I don't hear this content. Hey, you're not on mute. Hey, your camera's on. We can see what you're doing. All those little things in the beginning. That was really fun. That by the end, we're like, oh, come on. You should know this already.
Exactly.
That's hilarious. No, I think, did you see there was that YouTube video of the lawyer who had turned on the cat like screen and filter. And so as the judge is like trying to get him to turn stuff off, you see his like cat eyes looking everywhere, and you just know like this is exactly what it's been like for so many people as we've gone through this. It's such a brilliant point in time of just Zoom and you know, remote working in general. So tell me a bit, now that we've talked a little bit about your coming back to work situation and sort of the uniqueness about thinking through stuff like full makeup, full outfits, now I gotta actually wash my hair, like, let alone actually styling it and doing something with it. I mean, there were days that I was literally like, I could just put on a hat. Wait, I don't even need to put on a hat. No one's sitting next to me to know anything about my hair. But, you know, thinking back through your career, tell me a bit about how you got to where you are today. You know, did you come from a traditional, you know, background that, you know, led you to oil and gas, or did you, you know, pivot? Tell me just a bit about your career journey.
Yeah, I am not first generation oil and gas. I'm very proud. My dad used to be a roughneck on rigs way back in like the 80s. So very cool.
I have no idea what that means. What's a roughneck on a rig? I mean, I can assume, but.
Yeah, he was one of the manual laborers on a drilling rig, you know, making connections and getting oil out of the ground. So he worked his way from bottom all the way to, you know, he's held some pretty high positions at oil and gas companies. So
if he was taking home, I bet a lot though, if he was out on the rigs, or did he come home like on a certain cadence, or how did that work?
Yeah, so it is different. I don't find that it affected me greatly. By the time he had us, we were, he was in a sales position, and so he would do international travel. But for like me as a kid, that was mostly just exciting. Like he'd come back from Egypt with like cool coloring books on papyrus paper, and you're like, this is super cool for me. So
I love that perspective.
Yeah, he is not directly what got me there. I had a really great chemistry professor or teacher in high school. And I was kind of between chemical engineering and petroleum. And she showed me I had the personality for oil and gas, which I've now realized may have been an insult, but you know, it's worked out okay. So I did an engineering undergrad.
What is oil and gas personality? I have to ask. What if you had to sort of make up what you think it might be? And I'll tell you what I think like the data scientist personality is when others say that to me.
Yeah, I would take it to, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but
I'm oil and gas, damn it. Like, yeah, you can.
Yeah, like an asshole is basically what I would call it. This is the not nice term for it. I would take it as being rough and tough and stubborn, and like I said, in retrospect may have been an insult to a 17-year-old girl, but hey.
Because, you know, I think telling a 17-year-old you're stubborn, that would just flip them out as it is. Like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm going to argue that point now, and like, not even realizing you're proving my point. So, you know, it's just like when people say to me like, wow, you're not the typical data scientist. I'm like, what's the typical data scientist, pray tell? And then, you know, I call it this Elwood syndrome, where, you know, for a long time in my career, and I don't know if you felt this, you know, I like pink fuzzy things. Pink's my favorite color. I'm not going to hide it. And so I would come in with a pencil that had like a pom-pom on it, and people would be looking at me like, somehow that negated all my degrees in learning. Like, forget about all that. Now I'm a moron because of my pencil. And it really changed my behavior. Like, I succumbed to this pressure of everybody around me. And I remember asking for a cross pen, and I was like, oh, look at me. When I lost it within like the first few weeks of having this stupid pen that was super expensive. But for the weeks I had it, I felt very like, and so, you know, when I look back now and I think, oh, that's so silly. You know, I wish I could just shake myself and be like, hey, do you at the table? Like, if there's no reason why you can't have what kind of pen, pencil, whatever it may look like, unless your workplace has said, we do not allow for this in the workplace, then do you know? Do you have any moments like that where you look back at your younger self, like, you know, when you were talking about taking this as an insult, maybe, you know, is there anything you'd like to just tell yourself, or you'd want to shake into yourself, you know, your younger self?
Yeah, I have a funny story similarly. You know, my company, I was the very first female drilling engineer at my company before I went into data science. And I showed up for drilling my very first day in a pink dress because I was like, I was like, I can be just as effective of a drilling engineer in a pink dress. But what's funny is I almost felt like I was more confident coming straight out of school versus you start to feel that pressure to, you know, be one of the boys and
conforming to the environment you're in.
Yeah. So I've been really lucky because I've had just some really, really great male colleagues that have advocated for me in every capacity, right? Who helped me become the first female drilling engineer and stuff like that, who believed in me. So, I mean, if I was thinking of advice to give my former self, it would be find an advocate for yourself, right? It doesn't matter whether they're male or female or what their rank is, but it's somebody who's going to say, you know, this person is intelligent and they're capable and they're going to work hard for you. And I don't know that I stumbled into it. Okay. Like I was just being earnest and doing my job. But I don't think it really dawned on me till later how much those men probably influenced my career in getting me pushed through this and who also helped me, you know, move into data science. So I would just say
helping with imposter syndrome, I'd imagine. So like this idea of being the first, you know, female drilling engineer, you're in a room and you're with all your male other drilling engineers who've been doing this forever. Explain to me what that felt like. That must have been really intimidating.
Yeah, and like I said, I think I was just naive to it to some extent at the time because I was just like,
but you didn't know what you didn't know. So you're just like, here I am.
Yes. But I think I've had like a very interesting career where I haven't really stayed in the same job role for more than about 6 months to a year at a time. Okay. And so I think after like maybe my first role where I was like, you know, I was like, it's okay that I don't know what I'm doing, right? They'll support me. This is okay. I think as I transitioned, that's when I started to be like, I know nothing and I don't know why I'm in this role. And I had never heard of the imposter syndrome up until recently. Apparently it's a common tech term, but it's not as known. But, you know, what I found as I changed careers constantly in jobs, when I look back, I'll be like, man, I was smarter 6 months ago than I am today, right? And so I try to instill that, right? I'll look at a project from a job I was in 6 months ago or a year ago, a role I was in, and I'll be like, I don't think I could do that today. But the reality is I'm sure that I could. And so I'm trying to focus on like believing in myself today, like that 6 months from now, I'll look back and say like, wow, I was smarter than I thought I was. And I was more capable than I thought I was. Absolutely. So I'm trying to look at it today and say like, you can do this. You know what you're doing. You're okay, right?
Love that. No, I love it. I mean, I write letters to myself. So I've written a letter to myself when I was 20 for when I was 30, when I was 30 for 40. And now I've started doing it for 20 years out, not just 10, 20 and 30. Because I just, for the same point of what you're saying, you know, it's like, I think you should write these things down. So if you're, whatever you're doing today and whatever you're telling yourself today, write it down in a journal so that when you do go to your new role, you can look back and think, oh, well, these were the things that were making me nervous, or these are the things I told myself that made me feel like a rock star. Because they'll evolve over time, you know, that, you know, rocky music voice in my head, you know, that I amp myself up to, especially at like a conference or something. You know, I used to be wildly like, I would not an extrovert. I mean, I may not seem that way now. I was very introverted. I had social anxiety. I was like, excuse me, you know, this very shy voice. And what I realized is, and I wish someone had told me this, is, you know, that voice you have, it doesn't matter if you're in a room. So the whole imposter syndrome idea of people that are all PhDs that you're measuring yourself against, that at the end of the day, like Elon Musk said, if you can code a neural network, you don't need a PhD, or your level set of knowledge is the same. You know, they're coming at it, maybe they have a deep research basis. That's fantastic. But what you have is a business acumen that many, you know, research data scientists don't have. They don't have all these years in industry actually getting to build and deploy these things. And so it's that real world versus book knowledge. And so, but imposter syndrome plagued me for many, many, many years. So I think you're lucky that, you know, maybe you didn't know what you didn't know to feel like an imposter. And then you had mentors, it sounds like, that helped you get past. Tell me a time though, in all of these pivots, when you really stopped and looked at yourself in the mirror to say, hey, I'm pivoting now because I have to, or, you know, that this is a risk that I'm taking and I'm making the logical decision to take it for X reason. You know, when you were making all these changes, was there ever a time that you hit a crossroads like that, and how did you resolve that?
Yeah, my changes were not typically my decision. My company would come to me and say, "Hey, we need somebody in this role. Will you do it?" And I was like, "I'll figure it out. Like, we'll go for this." But in one of my positions, I had the fabulous opportunity to meet the data science manager at my company. And he's this, really cool Australian guy. So he sounds like more intelligent than all the Americans I'm working with just because of his accent. And I very quickly was like, this guy, like a data scientist can do what 8 engineers can do. And I thought back in all the projects I had worked on that I was so passionate about, they were all data driven, and it all started to dawn on me like, hey, I like this. And, I started working more with him, and he really, encouraged me to go back and get my master's in data science and tell my company for the first time, what I want is to get into this role instead of, not that I minded the engineering roles, don't get me wrong, I liked my job plenty, but I just realized, data could be so powerful. And oil and gas is in a particularly interesting time where we're finally starting to really work with tech companies, and data science is so applicable inside this industry. We have tons of data, and nobody's been doing any analytics on it. It's been really basic. And so it's worked out really well, given that I do have a technical background in it, with some master's education to write Python and apply machine learning, right? So that's been probably my biggest career change, was saying let's just do it. Let's suffer through going to grad school and make the change.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks that listen to this podcast are coming from, some of them are single parents or they're a multi-parent family, but they didn't get the opportunity maybe to do grad school until recently, or in some instances, they've just started going through their undergrad. And technology is one of those really unique industries where having a degree doesn't correlate at all to the salary that you're commensurate to, within the tech industry. And so, it's interesting. I work with a ton of people at various levels of their education journey. And I love that sort of, exhaustion as they share with me, and I remember back to, going through the master's program. But when you specific to data science, so I always say that we data scientists are, high maintenance babies. I'm speaking just for myself and my group, that we know we're smart. And so there's this level of expectation that comes with that, because, it just is, at least my group of data scientists. So things like, I don't know, just filing the expenses on time, or, the administrative stuff, the stuff that's not taxing their brain, is the stuff that's always I'm nagging, hey, did you do the stuff that's not interesting? When you got into data science and you were finding your footing in what's most interesting from an oil and gas perspective, did you have a mentor that was a data scientist to help level you and keep you, grounded to your knowledge? Or how did you really flourish as a data scientist?
It's been actually a pretty odd journey for me. So that same wonderful data science manager who wrote my letters of rec and encouraged me, he unfortunately passed away unexpectedly. And it was a team of 3 data scientists, including him, that went down to 2. And another one left the company, and it went down to 1. And they said, "You're partway through a master's, have at it." And so it has been me and just an incredibly intelligent and talented guy who I'm so blessed to work with, working together. And we've just been really lucky in that we have, he's so technical, and what other companies build neural networks for, he can do with regression. He is a brilliant technical person. And I have really found my footing in kind of the digital transformation space within it. So, we have data quality issues like everybody else. And so I have spent a lot of my time, because I tend to be a little more social than him. I would agree with you. I'm actually introverted, whether I seem it or not, but I'm less introverted than him maybe. And so we've really just ebbed and flowed well, because I will go to the root of the data and I will help fix the data from the ground up, understanding the level of data quality we need to build good models with. And building them myself sometimes, but I've been really lucky to work with him, who's helped me grow technically with building models, but as well in that, we just
partner. It's like your work husband, as they say. I mean, it's like we all have that person that we know what it's like when we have the bad person we work with, and how like the drudgery it becomes, or the walking on eggshells, or depending on your personality type. I mean, I've now seen it where they're just clashing. I'm one who's like, I pick my battles and I get along with pretty much anybody. But not everybody's that way. And so having that work partner that you can work with, that can mentor you, you learn from, that takes you, the work that you do and values it. I mean, that's rare. I don't think everybody gets that in their career. And so I would say going into a new field, that's very fortuitous. And so you took some chances, it sounds like, when you went down the data science path, but you listened to your mentors. And, to me, that's like the best of both worlds here. What would you advise, for folks that are like, oh, I want to take the data science path? If you had to sort of list out your top 4 things that they should, start to think about immediately when it comes to what you thought about when you were coming over to data science, what would those, top list of things be?
Yeah, I can give you the advice that I give other people who come to the company who tell me they want to go into data science, because I think data science is a buzz right now, especially in oil and gas, right? Oil and gas is a really unstable industry. I think people see that if you have data science and oil and gas, you at least have a secondary marketable skill set. And so for a while, it was really buzzing, like everybody wanting to go back. And so I would just do you actually love data, right? Have you worked through Excel and are you bored with Excel? Have you worked through like a Spotfire and a Power BI and you're bored with those? And have you tried actually coding, right? And so lots of times I ask people that question and they don't, they're not even very advanced in Excel. And I was like, well, you can definitely code without being advanced in Excel. And that's not what I'm saying. It's very engineering of me, but,
no, but there is something to be said about a person who loves data. Like, I love data. I talk about my personal life and it always comes back to data. I talk about fantasy football and it comes back to a model. It's like my life comes back to data. My son, all of his measurements are so that I could track longitudinally him, because I was going to do something with it from a machine learning. So that's me. I mean, I even measured the geese, like what geese came back to this year. Like, that's the kind of stuff I do for fun. So you're right. There's something to be said about, do you love data? I mean, you can learn Excel and take a class. You can't learn a love of data. You either love being surrounded with it or you hate it. There's really not a lot of people who are in a gray area of like, meh, could take it, could leave it. I mean, that's just how data is. So you're right. I love that list. I think that is brilliant. Do you like data? Can you does Power BI
Yeah. Are you bored with Excel? Are you bored with Power BI? Well, then please come to the data science team, because we'd love to have you.
And then can you, do you have any sort of levels? Because like me and my background, I was what they called a script kiddie. I hated that term, but it was a skill set I learned when I was very young. And so it paid off because it was all Python. There was no idea of a data scientist, but in my career, whether at Apple, working on Siri, they've had various titles, but it's all been in the data science realm. But you're right. I predict in the next 5 to 10 years, this role that people are, spending so much time trying to go to school now and go back to put themselves into is going to kind of be ubiquitously in all business processes. It'll be, ML is not going to live over in an island of machine learning. It's just going to be infused into our visualization tools, into our business tools, into all of our business processes and the tools we use to support them. Otherwise, it can't live in the sort of the life cycle it is today. It's just a new favorite thing, and that needs to now become ubiquitous in everything we do, just like formulas are in Excel. That's at least my prediction, is that ML is going to be germane to everything we do, and we won't even know that it's there, but it's there. And so you're right. I often think about, what am I going to do in 10 years from now? So I'm going to turn it around on you. What are you going to do in 10 years from now when there really isn't a data scientist as much as maybe an operationalization engineer or somebody who's maintaining some of the algorithms maybe that have been productionalized? What are you going to do next?
I wish I had a firm answer for you, but I can tell you I recently have really discovered how much I love processes, right? I love meeting with somebody who spends 5 hours a week making a manual report and automating it for them. I love looking through data and understanding how we can simplify it, get it flowing easier into a tool. So I think what I view for myself is some version of like a digital transformation,
re-engineer, like
solutions engineer, solutions architect. Like I think that I would eventually like to go there, but I like building models right now. I like my job role particularly because I get to do, it's a small team, right? So I get to be a data engineer, a data scientist, a solutions architect, an enterprise architect. So I get to wear all kinds of hats and kind of figure out what I like and what I don't like because I'm lucky, really.
No, that is very lucky. It's giving you an opportunity to really hone your skill in an area that you like and you enjoy, because there are so many facets. I mean, data science isn't just one thing. It's in everything that we do. And so one thing I'd suggest, when I heard you say you liked the process and really understanding that, have you ever explored something like maybe a lean black belt or something in the Six Sigma space, or the design for Six Sigma? Because the tool, that's something I did, and I found the tools invaluable. They come up all the time in terms of even a data science project. Can we apply them to our process so we have more of a team process when it comes to how we approach data science projects? Have you ever thought about that? To me, your passion feels like if you were to look at a next step, that might be an area I would suggest.
I will gladly take that advice. I had not thought about it, but I think thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's tons of certifications online, and because statistics is such a big part of it, it's not like you're going to be putting away data science and picking up this. It's this beautiful blend where then you also come out of it knowing how to build new processes or re-engineer existing ones, how to bring people into a room for consensus. I mean, there's crazy things you don't think about, especially in sort of the Zoom pass world. But tying into that, did you ever facilitate a Zoom brainstorming during the pandemic at all? And if you did, do you have any tips for others who are like, oh my God, it was the most painful thing I've ever done. How do you do it better?
Yeah, that's probably an area I could use to improve on. Those brainstorming Zoom meetings, it is just hard to get people to talk. You stumble through it yourself and hope somebody takes pity on you is my current approach.
Oh, yeah, I actually really like that approach. I think there should be a documented approach, like the take pity on me, because that's the reality. You're always in that meeting where there's the awkward silence and then somebody throws you a bone, like, well, I'll get started. And it always opens up the flow. I had to just ask because we've tried 9 different, ways to do it, but we've been trying out something called Mural, and I think there's something called Miro, but it's basically these virtual sticky notes where everybody gets their own color and can just quietly brainstorm at the same time. So that way, for people who are shy or who don't want to talk, they can just add it on the Post-it and still feel heard, and then they have a facilitator group it, which I actually loved until I was facilitating, and I'm like, oh man, they make it seem so easy, like drag this. I was like assigning the wrong colors, and then I'm like, oh, I wish I was just on a whiteboard. Like, this would be so much easier. So, to your point, how we, started this session, going back to work, I'm actually very excited about it, and I will be for that first week. And then I'm going to be like, you know what, I just want to go back to being at home. I think I missed traveling most than anything, the offsites, the all hands meetings. I've not met my team. I joined my team during the pandemic. I've never met any of them. I've heard stories, and I'm like, he's 6'9", really? Like, you just can't tell that in a Zoom call. That's I still don't believe him. I'm like, I can't wait to meet you to see you stand up, because I'm going to call BS on 6'9". And it's, so it's those things. And I would imagine, coming back, from working from home, you now get to see your partner in crime. And, is that a nice experience as well?
It really is. Like I said, it's been a hard adjustment, but I think there's definite pros to it, right? Him and I, it's much more comfortable to have a brainstorming session in person than over Zoom, right? I don't know why people seem more willing. So, we can sit in each other's offices and talk about, the next best thing for us, right? What's the Netflix that's sitting out there for us if we're sitting at Blockbuster today? And so those conversations just feel more organic and comfortable. So I'm excited for you to go back to work as well and meet your 6'9" coworker.
I know. I think we've said December roughly, if we're going to do an offsite in person, would be around the time that we think that would happen. So yes, I'm already like, if I were to ever change jobs, I've already made a plan with my colleagues to be like, hey, we're meeting up somewhere because I have to meet you in person at least to be like, hi, nice to meet you.
So then I have a question for you. Is your team then, are you guys based all across the country? So that is so interesting to me, because that really, to some extent, a hybrid for you looks very different than a hybrid for me, really, because I sit 2 offices down from everybody.
Absolutely. So like most of my team is in the headquarters, you know, the Redmond area. So for them, they have a space. Now, Charlotte happens to be like the southeast headquarters of Microsoft. And so I have a desk still there. But the office is very different. The energy is different. There's not as many people. And so going into the office, more times than not, your colleagues wouldn't even be there because we were all traveling so much. I mean, I traveled 80% of the time regardless. So yes, you're absolutely right. Because we are so geo dispersed, it's a very different hybrid model when you're versus say the Redmond, core team of people at Microsoft. So, but anyways, I know we've ran super over in terms of the normal time frame, so thank you. I just found it very interesting to just connect with you, and we very rarely have a data scientist on, so I appreciate that. And I help the audience not have to draw through my algorithm like, hey, what do you use for this in oil and gas? That's clearly what I wanted to ask, but I didn't. So I'd love to have you on again to do like a data science deep dive. I've been trying to wrangle together some women where we're going to do more of like a panel and then just talk about maybe an example or a project we worked on that we're passionate about. You don't have to use any numbers or anything, but just to give some examples by industry. Would you be interested in something like that and coming back on?
Yeah, that sounds great. I really enjoyed talking to you. I feel really siloed from tech most of the time. Oil and gas, we're the redheaded stepchild that lots of people don't want to play with. So it is really nice to have the opportunity to talk to people in proper tech.
No, I would love it. And I love oil and gas. So you're in good company. But I think it's always wonderful to bring women together that are data scientists from different industries and then find out that the challenges we all face are the same. Our data may be very different, but by and large, the ideas we bring to the table are largely the same because that's the way we think. It requires that out of the box thinker. So thank you. I'm going to hit you up when we sort of form this group, and I very much appreciate you coming on the show today, Danica.
Thank you guys so much for your time. It was great chatting.
And thank you, listeners, for listening to Annielytics Podcast. Have a great afternoon.
Loading the kids in the car, brokering peace in the back seat, mastering the snack handoff without even looking. Why are simple things sometimes so complicated? Thankfully, with auto owners, insurance doesn't have to be one of them. We work with independent agents who live in your community, know you by name, and answer when you call. They keep insurance simple, so you can worry about more important things, like
Loved what you've heard on this week's episode? Well, the answer is simple. It would mean the world to us if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and feedback. Spreading the word really is the best way to grow our podcast and achieve even greater things. Thank you.